Welcome everyone to a special episode of the NoBS podcast, the gaming news podcast where we ditch the sugarcoating and give it to you straight. I'm Blake.
And I'm Steve.
And if you're looking for real talk without the BS, you've come to the right place. Before we jump in, don't forget to stay connected with us. Follow us on X at NoBS Podcast GG for all the latest updates and hot takes. Check out our YouTube channel at NoBS Podcast GG and be sure to hit that subscribe button. We're also on TikTok at NoBS Podcast GG throughout the week, so make sure to stop on by and say what's up. Love what you're hearing? Show your support by liking this episode, dropping a comment with your thoughts, and subscribing to keep up with all our future content. This special episode, we're talking about our top 5 horror games of all time, so to jump right into it, we'll kind of go over what IGN has for their top 5, and we'll compare like our list to theirs, and then make like a general, this is our overall top 5. So before we go into this, Steve, so with these lists, you know, they got games on here from like early 2000s, 1990s. Like, how often do you think like this list like gets? Do you think they really like update it like as these new horror games release, or like do you think the list like will remain kind of stagnant?
I think so. You kind of tend to see. It definitely makes sense that there's games that have been out for a long time, just because I don't think there's a lot of innovation when it comes to horror games. You kind of tend to see a game come out and it really impacts the industry in a big way, similar to kind of games like Phasmophobia and whenever these big VR games came out, they were kind of taking the industry by storm. But every once in a while you do see a game that kind of comes out or is remastered, which is kind of touching on that. There's a game on this list that is a remastered version of an older game that kind of made it to the top 5. So. But no, yeah, I don't know how often they go back and look at this and update it, but I definitely see them going in there and changing things around.
Do you think with like how far technology has come with like these gaming systems that remastered versions would actually be better? Like, cause like I said, I got some games from like old times. Like, do you think like if they came back and remastered them and updated the graphics, it would make them like better?
Oh, yeah. I guess like a recent game that just kind of got remastered is Dead Rising, and I have not played the original Dead Rising in a long time, but just the little things that they kind of did to update this game, it's huge. Like back in the day, you weren't able to aim while you moved, and now just that one little thing just made this game so much better and run so much smoother.
No, I agree. All right, so to go into this, so we got our list, like I said, from IGN. For number 5, they got Dead Space on there. Now, how do you feel about Dead Space being number 5 on this list?
I think that's good. That's a good spot. I've never played Dead Space all the way through, so I'm not 100% in whether or not saying that like, yeah, this is exactly where it belongs. But all the lists that I looked at, like Dead Space was always up there, whether it was number 1, number 2, it was somewhere in people's top 5. So I'm definitely comfortable with this.
Yeah, I think it's definitely top 5 worthy. So I played it all the way through, and it's kind of like an outer space, horror thrilling campaign game. I mean, I actually got it on my top 5, but I don't have it as number 5. I have Dead Island, and so you've seen the trailer for Dead Island, right?
A long time ago.
So I've watched it probably like 5 times a day while making this list, and it's arguably probably like the best trailer for a video game that I've ever watched. It's the first trailer that I've ever had that I had like an emotional reaction to, especially more so now that I'm a dad and that I have a daughter. And for those who haven't seen it, I suggest looking up the trailer. So the trailer's in reverse, and basically, it's like playing everything backwards. The events of what had just unfolded, and it shows like this family out on vacation, and they're in their like hotel room, and their daughter got bit by like a zombie out in the hallway, and it's showing like the dad like going to try to save his daughter, and the daughter ends up biting him in the neck, and then like in the beginning of the scene, you see her kind of rising up from the ground because she was on her dad's back, and her dad like threw her off his back, and she fell out the window of this hotel, to the ground. But the game was pretty good, and it definitely deserves a top 5 for me. Is it the best horror game? Probably not, but like I said, the emotional attachment to the game made it like easily a top 5 for me.
Yeah, and it's such a cool concept too. I love zombie survival games, and being able to kind of customize and make your weapons however you want, it just gives you almost like infinite possibilities. And anytime you're able to just find stuff and just craft things and make things better, it's awesome. And I don't know if you've played the second one at all, but
No,
the
I
second
haven't
one
played number
adds
two.
it adds like a whole nother layer to the game where you're able to pick a character, and this character is stronger in certain aspects of combat or other things, and then you're able to build weapons that kind of that work well with this character. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, maybe I was funny as I was going through Steam, and I was actually probably gonna pick up Dead Island again, just because it was again that trailer, dude, just like hits you in the feels and makes you want to play the game. It's like you get so attached to the trailer, you almost forget about the game itself.
Yeah, it's a super fun game for sure. My number 5, I have Ghost Watchers on here, and for me I've never played Phasmophobia, but it's a Phasmophobia like game. I've watched some content creators play Phasmophobia, and the games are very, very similar. And I think there's so many different types of games that are like this. But for me, out of all the Phasmophobia clones that I've played, Ghost Watchers is the one that I've enjoyed the most. I think one of the things that I love about horror games is when you're able to play with friends, and I think that kind of tends to add another layer of horror to it, because like when you can hear your friends reacting to something, it kind of tends to add that other level of stress, and you're starting to think, oh crap, is this going to happen to me? Is this going to happen to me? And Ghost Watchers is pretty cool in a sense where you're able to once you discover what kind of ghost you think you're hunting, you're able to capture the ghost and then take the essence of the ghost. But there's so many cool things about this game, and I really, really enjoy playing it. Out of all the ones I've played, whether it's Ghost Watchers, Demonologist, Devour, stuff like that, like I thoroughly enjoy Ghost Watchers.
So I know you said it's kind of like there's a lot of games similar to it. Do you think that horror games are kind of like that genre where it's kind of hard to make, an original game? I mean, obviously you got like Resident Evil games and stuff like that are based on like movies and books and all this other stuff. Do you think it's like, because it seems like most of these horror games kind of just base everything on like jump scares and stuff like that. Do you think it's kind of hard to like make an original horror game?
Yeah, it is, because you kind of have to, with horror specifically, I definitely feel like you have to decide whether you want to focus more on a story that's really captivating and using that story to kind of mess with people's minds, to kind of, one, add that level of psychological terror into the game, versus like, yeah, just jump scares and just random noises here and there kind of messing with people. So I think debating on what they kind of want to focus on, if they want to focus on a captivating story, you have a little bit more to kind of work with, but those are so much harder to make. And I think these simple little horror games where you just have random jump scares that are kind of all over the internet are a lot easier to make than anything else.
Yeah, no, I agree. So IGN has for number 4 a game called PT. Now, I've never played it, but I guess it's a first-person survival horror game that has like a lot of puzzles and stuff like that in the game. What do you think about that being number 4? Have you even heard of that game? Or
so I heard of it, and I guess it's not playable anymore. It was sort of released. I can't remember exactly if it's the same game that I'm thinking of that was released for a promo, and it just kind of freaked a bunch of people out.
For Silent Hill.
And people were just like loving it. And there's a bunch of stuff like that. I remember there was something, I think it was like Doritos or something like that, released something similar, like some sort of psychological demo game. And then at the end of it, you find out it was a promo for Doritos. I'd have to look it up again. But I've never played this and I've never watched a whole lot of it. But
so do you think a game that isn't like never really made it out should even be like in a top 5 game of a list of games that have actually been developed and like are full release games?
That's hard to say, because it's kind of like what's more important, the amount of people that played it and enjoyed it, or the impact it made on the industry. I think in terms of like horror and horror genre, like just seeing like the names that are attached to it, it's crazy. Like seeing Guillermo del Toro attached to a game is insane. He's a horror master, and even me not ever playing this, just I would definitely, if it was available, I would definitely pick it up and play it just because of that.
Okay, I could agree with that. So what do you have for number 4?
My number 4, and honestly, this could probably go anywhere on my list and maybe even higher, but I love this game, and I think this is the best, I guess, like truly scary game that I've ever played. It's Resident Evil 7. So this is the only game where I was like uncomfortable the entire time that I was playing this game. From the moment I turned on the game and seeing the environment you're kind of thrown into, it's like a super creepy house in the bayou. It just looks like it's haunted, and it doesn't help that the first time I ever kind of touched this game was in VR. It was I was still working at Best Buy, and they had a VR promo for the PlayStation VR, and this was the demo that you were able to play. So it's like just going into that and you just see it. It was terrifying for sure.
Do you think the VR like makes it like, do you think it made it that much more like scary?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think it. Have you ever done anything on a VR?
I did, but I could never get a hold of my VR legs, so I was always getting. I did play Phasmophobia. That was like the only kind of horror game that I ever really played on VR.
It definitely messes with your senses, where it's like you kind of tend to forget what's real and what's not, depending on the way the game is kind of set. But even this game, like playing it on PC, it's terrifying. Like you're just, as soon as you're kind of introduced to the family, it's like these deranged psychopaths who are trying to kill you. You're going in trying to save your wife, and your wife is trying to kill you. It's a pretty simple. I think all Resident Evils, in a sense, it's a very simple concept. You kind of go from point A to point B. You're picking up items. You find items that you're using to unlock other areas that you've kind of already gone through. But it's a very linear progression. But the story, kind of like we were talking about earlier, it's one of those things that kind of captivates you and kind of keeps you going. It's like you're going through this game, and there's jump scares, there's things that you're trying to hide from. Like this game does something really cool where the main protagonist, like each zone has like its own boss basically, and the boss is kind of walking around throughout the zone, so you're kind of having to hide and maneuver around them as you're finding the items that you need to unlock the other zone, so you can get everything, so you can finally move on to the next zone.
Well, that explains why you like it. It's got the roguelike feel to it.
Not in a sense, yeah. It's you don't get the like the progression that you get in like a roguelite, where it's where you're leveling up and getting stronger every single time. It's very much like your power level is the same throughout the thing. Like, yeah, you find different weapons, and I think one of the things that I wish that this game did a little bit differently is probably not expose you to as many weapons as you do get. And granted, I think towards the end you kind of do need these weapons to beat it. Yeah. But once I got a shotgun, it kind of felt like, okay, I felt like I was ready for anything. But versus before that, you're kind of terrified, where it's like, if I see something, okay, am I going to be able to handle it? No, I'm not going to be able to handle it. Crap. Okay, I need to make sure that I'm not going in too far, because 4 or 5 monsters are going to pop out, and I'm going to have to run for my life trying to make sure I don't die, because all I have is a knife, and all I have is a handgun with like 6 bullets. And that's one of the really cool things I think Resident Evil does in general, is they add a scarcity to your materials, to whether it's your healing or your ammo or your weapons. It's awesome, and it's super scary throughout the entire game. The story is awesome, and I think it's the best Resident Evil ever.
So I take it as you've played quite a few of the Resident Evil games.
Yes.
Do you think that they've kind of like gone overboard? Because like I remember Resident Evil from like back in the day, and it like was like strictly zombies, right? And now it's like become this crazy like alien, like everything. It's so weird.
Well, not even that. Like it's still in a sense zombies. Like it's all kind of. I think that's one of the really cool things that this that they do is they kind of tie it all back to Umbrella Company, the Umbrella Corporation, and it's scientists that are messing around with the human anatomy and trying to create different things, and then all of a sudden something goes awry and you end up with these crazy mutations, and these crazy mutations feed on humans, and that's kind of how you're able to, everything else is kind of created. Like, yes, it's not necessarily just zombies now. Like, you have crazy mutants, and I think I haven't played 8, but I heard it's good as well. But I know you have like vampires, and you have like,
that's what I'm saying. It's so freaking, like, it's so far fetched, bro.
Well, it's still in a sense like you're still kind of, again, ultimately you're brought back into that. Everything is based around Umbrella and what Umbrella is doing, and Umbrella is the reason that everything is happening, and ultimately everything is brought back to that. And I think the fact that they're able to tie it all in is awesome.
Yeah, okay, I can kind of see where you're coming from with that. So for my number 4, I actually have Dead Space. Like I said, it's a great game. Definitely deserves a top 5. I'm not going to go like super into it because we already really kind of talked about it. But basically, like I said, the campaign was really cool. It had a lot of good jump scares, and it definitely deserves a spot on the top 5. So IGN for number 3, they have Amnesia. Have you ever played that game?
I have never played this.
Me neither. It looks pretty cool. I said the game came out in like 2010, and it's another first-person survival horror game, which is, I guess, it's kind of like, seems like that's like the kind of theme with a lot of these horror games. Do you think that it deserves to be freaking number 3?
That's hard to say because, again, it's difficult to judge games that we've never played. I'm pretty confident that it's a good game. I like the idea that you have a sanity level, and if you're in the darkness too long, you kind of get to you lose your sanity, and it affects the way you play. So you have to kind of manage that portion of it. I think whenever horror games add that sense of like, okay, you have to do certain things because if you're not doing this, it's going to negatively affect the way you play. Like, that's one thing that like games like Ghost Watchers and Phasmophobia do, where it's like if you're exposed to the ghost too long, or if you're exposed to certain hauntings too long, your sanity level goes down, your health goes down. So you have to make sure that you're managing that, and you're constantly checking your levels and making sure you're not exposed too long, because otherwise you're going to end up dead.
Yeah, the thing is probably one of the first games that did that, kind of have like that resourcing that you had to manage.
Yeah. No, yeah.
So what do you have for number 3?
So my number 3 is it's Five Nights at Freddy's.
Why are you laughing before you even say it?
Kind of talking about like an older game. It's Five Nights at Freddy's. For me, it's like, while I've only really ever played the original game, the franchise is huge.
Yeah,
it's a super simple concept. You're a security guard that you need to keep watch of these animatronics to survive a night, and that's it. And kind of looking into it, I guess there's like actual like strats that you use in order to beat the game, and I had no idea. Whenever I've played it, I just kind of just go with the flow, and I end up winning, and sometimes I end up losing. But again, it's super simple. It's you have your resources, and your resources is your power. This is how much battery life you have. Everything that you do uses power. So whether it's you're looking at your camera, you're closing your doors, you're turning on your lights, and the whole point of it is just to survive the night. These animatronics move, and you either need to catch them with your camera to stop them from moving, or shut your door so they don't come in and kill you. Again, super simple, but the game is incredible. It's incredibly fun. I don't know too much about the lore, and I know people love the whole FNAF lore, and they look into all this stuff, but the characters are designed super creepily. I think that's one of those things too. It's like I don't know if a lot of them are still around, but like the whole Chuck E. Cheese's things with those animatronics, there's always something so creepy about those things where it feels like they're real but like soulless at the same time. And I think this does a really good job at kind of capturing that.
Yeah, Five Nights at Freddy's is probably one of like the biggest names too, like one of the most popular names on these lists. So I think it definitely deserves top 3. I have Phasmophobia, specifically the VR. When I played it like on VR, like it was like the first game that I played VR that you were able to like play with a group of people, and like the whole, ghost hunting aspect of it was freaking awesome and creepy. What do you think about me putting as number 3? You think it's a good spot?
No, yeah, that's good. Like I said, I've never played Phasmophobia, and I've only ever played some of like the clones. But like I said, my list is definitely interchangeable in a sense. Like I think all these games are great, and I think they're all fun. I think the only one that is like my number 1 is probably kind of locked in there, and that's probably the only one for me.
I'm curious to see what you got for number 1. I'll admit, like, for me too, like what makes a good horror game is like not only a game that is scary, but something that you can play with friends. That's what I like about Phasmophobia.
Yeah, I definitely think like I was saying with that, it adds a whole nother layer of scariness to the game.
I can't play a horror game with you though, because I know your ass would be screaming like a little girl.
No, but if I hear if I'm walking around and I see nothing, and I hear my friends like acting scared or screaming or something, like I'm definitely gonna get on edge and feel like, okay, crap, something's coming. And there's one game that I've played a lot called Demonologist, and there's a pretty cool thing in there where it's like if you go to certain mirrors and you say things in front of the mirrors, you'll get like a crazy jump scare.
Yeah.
So it's always it's always so funny. It's always so funny for me to like convince my friends to go over there and be like, hey, you have to say this, and they'll say it, and and just seeing the jump scare coming, it's awesome.
It's one of those things too. It's like almost like what was it? You said like boogeyman or whatever it is into like your mirror in the dark. It's one of those things. It's like you wouldn't even want to do it outside of the game. You'd be like too worried, It's gotta creep you out.
Yeah.
So number 2, and IGN has Resident Evil 2 that came out in 2019. Now, again, Resident Evil is another one of those games that has such a huge IP and like such a very popular name behind it. I did actually play a little bit of Resident Evil 2. Me and Megan actually played it quite a bit, and I actually I think it's a pretty good game. Definitely deserves top 5. Number 2, maybe not, but it's definitely up there. Have you played that one at all, or?
Yes. Again, I think it's a great game, and I think a lot of the reasons why it's up here so high, it's one of the like original horror shooter survival games. It does everything so well. The story is incredible. The scares are great, but I'm a bit biased where I think Resident Evil 7 is just far superior. It just does everything better. And even before that, I think Resident Evil 4 is better than Resident Evil 2. But I'm completely fine with it being at number 2.
Yeah, this one is actually a remake of the one that came out in 1998. So I think it does follow that thing how you kind of said, like, if a game can be remade with like better graphics, better movement and stuff like that, it definitely will like up that level of it. So what do you got for number 2?
So my number 2 is The Forest.
Oh, that's a good one.
When I think of survival games, this is kind of the first game that comes to mind. You're like stranded on a deserted island after a plane crash, and your son is taken, and that's kind of like the premise to the whole story. You're trying to find your son, and you're just kind of given liberty to do whatever you want. There's no direction, nothing. You just need to figure it out. And that goes from finding food, finding water, finding shelter. And I remember the first time I played it, and I had no idea what was going on. So I'm just walking around, going around, and then I just start adventuring out at night. And I'm very
That's when all the spooky things come out, dude.
Yeah, it's like I'm very quickly discovering that there's things out there, these monsters that, and they're out there during the day, but they're definitely a lot more active at night. But it's awesome because you kind of get to figure everything out as you go. Like there's not really any direction to it. There's caves that you need to explore. There's certain things that you have to do to beat the game towards the end. But for the most part, you can you can play the entire game without doing any of that if you really wanted to. Just go around, just discovering, just building your things, and like sometimes even building shelters and getting them completely destroyed by the by the monsters. So it's you're just having battles against the monsters. It's such a fun game, and it's definitely terrifying. I think the biggest part of the game is kind of like the unknown, and then exploring the caves themselves adds a whole nother layer of terrifyingness, because you lose you drop everything when you die. So it's like if you have like a bunch of stuff, like I remember just getting I'm trying to think like exactly, I can't remember if you get like if you get a gun or not towards the end, but I had like a samurai sword and I lost it in the cave. So it's like now I'm having to go into the cave to find my stuff because I want my samurai sword back. So it's like trying to traverse through this cave and like find everything back. It's ridiculous, but it's so fun. I think one of the really cool things to kind of compare it to, I don't know if you've ever seen the show like From.
Yeah, no, like I'm watching that. I'm actually watching that right now. The new season just came out.
It definitely kind of reminds me too of the game. Like reminds me of the show itself, where it's like you have everything is kind of quiet during the day, but as soon as you get to nighttime, like you start hearing these monsters just like screaming and running at you, and it'll be completely quiet, and you'll just feel like you're in a forest, but all of a sudden you just hear a scream, and you're like, "Fuck, where's that coming from? Where's that coming from?" You're just running wherever you can. Like it's completely dark, you can't see anything in front of you. Even with a light, it's still ridiculously dark, and just trying to find your way back home or find some sort of shelter to hide from these monsters. It's awesome.
So I actually played a ton of The Forest when it came out. I played it with Brett and a buddy of mine. I think we even played it too together. They actually had it. I don't know if you got a chance to play it. That was available to be played with VR too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So like I like it because I mean I've made this mention before. I love crafting survival games like what was that? Enshrouded, I think it was Enshrouded. There's a bunch of games that we've played that have that survival crafting, looting aspect to it. So like I loved that with The Forest, and I really wish I would have put that on my list. I didn't even freaking think about that game. That game was fantastic. For my number 2, I got The Evil Within. Now it was actually so that was actually like the first horror game that I got Megan to play. And it was kind of like, it's one of those games that are like kind of confusing to like figure out like where everything was and like how to progress, but the game still was like super exhilarating and like roguelike. It's one of the only games that really like kind of like made like my heartbeat like just freaking pump so fast. Like there was like a scene where like you're in a hospital and you're trying to hide from this guy that's got like a cleaver and stuff like that. So that one, like I said, Megan loved it, I loved it, and it definitely is a top 3 game for me. Nice.
No, yeah, it's I very minimally played it. I played it when it first came out, and I don't remember a whole lot of that game, but it
had a lot of hype around it.
Yeah, no, yeah. I've always kind of wanted to go back and replay it, and I've just never gotten back to it, but I definitely want to try it out.
Yeah, no, you definitely do. All right, so here we got the number 1. All right, you ready for this? The IGN has Silent Hill 2, the remake that came out in 2024. Now, do you think that's a number 1 game?
I can definitely see it. Like, for the longest time, Silent Hill 2 was kind of touted as the scariest game of all time. I've never played it, and when the remake came out, it's on my radar to pick up and to play. I just haven't had the time to do it. But again, it's one of those games you kind of just always hear about. It's terrifying. You're just doing the most basic things, but there's so many things about the game, whether it's you're hearing things around the corner and you're seeing ghosts and you're seeing things just kind of pop out. I'm completely fine with it being at number 1.
I can't believe the remake actually just came out this month on October 7th. I was kind of surprised to see it already hit like a number 1 spot. Although I will say, dude, like even like the Silent Hill movies, Megan is obsessed with Silent Hill, dude. And like, I mean, you got like such iconic horror characters like Pyramid Head and the nurses and everything like that in the game. Like I definitely think I can almost agree with it being in number 1. Like it's such a big IP and such a scary game. Like you said, it's like just got that eerie, like you hear, sounds around corners and stuff like that. Definitely a top game.
Yeah. No,
So,
yeah.
so I'm nervous to hear what your number one, your favorite horror game of all time is. It better be good.
So my number one is Condemned: Criminal Origins. It's the first horror game I've ever played. It was a launch title on the Xbox 360, and it was literally the reason why I bought a 360. It's the first title where I was legit terrified the entire time. It felt like you were kind of playing like a Silence of the Lambs film.
Okay.
You're basically an FBI agent that gets framed for murder, and you're trying to figure out who the serial killer is, and you're kind of thrown into this world where you're having to traverse through the underworld, and you have these like it's not monsters, it's homeless people that are like cracked out on drugs just attacking you basically. But there's so many things that it does that just kind of mess with you, from the way things are looking to the sounds that you hear to the things that you see moving. Like there's one scene in particular where you're just walking around and there's mannequins on the left, and you just keep walking, and all of a sudden you hear a noise, and you turn around, and the mannequins are right behind you.
Looking at you? Oh man!
No, they like actually follow you, and every time you move forward, they keep following you. They keep following you, and you'll be walking through like a dark room, and you'll hear the vagrants kind of crawling around or talking and basically saying, "We're gonna get them," all around you, and it sounds like they're just surrounding you, and they just never come. Sometimes you'll see them come at you, but sometimes they just don't come. You just hear them. And it just freaks you out because you just stop. It's like, okay, where are they coming from? Where are they coming from? Okay, you got to get ready to go. And it's not a super complex game. Like the combat is it's very basic. It's just melee attacks, and you're very rarely thrown into battling against multiple enemies. It's usually always like a 1v1.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, you just never know when it's coming, and there's always things going around that kind of mess with your head, and it's awesome.
So I was doing a little bit of reading while you were talking about that. I guess like the game, like there's a huge outcry for wanting a remake for that game. They're saying it's they're like, how the fuck has Condemned Criminal Origins not been remade yet?
Oh, I would love it. I would pick it up instantly. It's very similar to me with like Dead Rising.
Yeah.
Like while Dead Rising, I definitely think Dead Island was a better zombie survival. Like Dead Rising was the first zombie survival type game that I played, and there's so much nostalgia that comes with that game with me that I loved it. And Condemned for me is, again, it's what got me into the Xbox 360. It's what made me want to buy it. It's the first horror game that I actually ever played, and I would love to pick that up.
See, I think nostalgia kind of swayed my list too. I'm not gonna lie to you. My number one, you ready for this one? The best horror game of all time. I'm going to say best game of all time is Resident Evil Director's Cut from 1997. Now that was kind of, this was like the first horror game I ever played, and the first horror game that legitimately made me scared to play it. Like there was like cutscenes and stuff like that. Yeah, dude, there was like cutscenes when opening the doors. Like you were like scarce for ammo for your pistol. Like, dude, I remember just walking around like the mansion, dude, and like you would hear the zombie groans, and you'd see the dead bodies and stuff like that. Like it is by far, like when I think of horror games, like this is automatically like my number one.
Really?
Have you never played it?
No, I've played it. I just definitely wouldn't put it as my number one. Again, I'm very biased because I think there's just so many better Resident Evils.
This was like the first like big one, dude.
I mean, again, I still think 7 is far superior, and then 4 is better than that. I think in terms of like Resident Evil like tier list, it's 7 and 4 are like 10 9s. I mean, 4 is incredible, but they're 10 9s, and everything else is like around like 8 7 out of 10 for me.
I got it, dude. Nope, sorry.
Again, like, have you ever played Resident Evil 4 or Resident Evil 7?
No.
You definitely need to play those two, and when you do, like, you'll kind of notice like there's such a huge gap between those two games and everything else when it comes to Resident Evil. in my opinion, with the story, with the gameplay, with the way the game scares you and feels. It's just it's hard to explain. Like,
well, I'm not gonna lie, I really haven't played a Resident Evil game since back in the day.
Oh wow!
I'm not even gonna lie to you. Well, I'm not a big. I don't want to say I'm not a big horror game person. Like that's Megan's area, dude. I mean, if you could, like, she loves everything horror, dude. Like, we go to horror conventions, all this other stuff because of her. I've never been a huge horror game person. Again, unless it's like a multiplayer kind of thing.
Yeah. They did re-release the original Resident Evil back in 2015. It's probably something you could check out, but.
I need to hop on it. I need to hop on it and get some more horror games.
And they're all on sale right now, so it's a good time to pick up and play those games.
Dude, I'm a bitch when I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm a straight bitch when it comes to horror games, dude. Like my office,
really?
In my office, where I play everything at is on the opposite side of the house, dude. Like, I'm one of those people that, like, you know, I'm gonna turn the light off and fucking run to my room after watching some scary. Like, that's me, dude. I'm not gonna pretend. Don't even say it's the fun of it. Don't even say no. Hell no.
That's the fun of it. You want to get scared. You want to feel like something is coming at you, and you feel like something is on the other side of the room, or make sure your door is closed before you go to bed because you don't want something walking in.
I still sleep with the covers covering my feet because I'm afraid someone's going to grab me in the middle of the night.
There's definitely other games like I know I definitely want to check out the Alien game. That's another game that I hear a lot of really good things about, and I have that ready to go or downloaded, and I just haven't had the opportunity to play it. Dead by Daylight's another game that we could definitely throw on the top 5. I think it's one of it's the first game that I can remember of that kind of did what it does. Yeah. In a sense, it's like a horror survival game, but it's you're put up against other players instead of the computer.
It's even got like a fucking competitive scene to it.
Oh, I know, and I think the competitive scene kind of ruined it. But again, it's there's like overpowered characters that people kind of tend to play, and there's specific strats that you have to use to play, and it's I think whenever you kind of start getting into that competitive aspect of it can ruin it for some people, but it's still a fun game to play with friends.
All right, so before we kind of come up with like our official top 5 list, do you have any honorable mentions? I know you said Dead by Daylight. Any other honorable mentions that you'd want to say should or could make a top 5?
Left 4 Dead 2 is definitely up there for me.
Do you have the same list as me? Because you said Dead by Daylight and Left 4 Dead, and I got both of those on my honorable mentions.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, like Left 4 Dead 2 is like one of the first like multiplayer like survival or zombie like survival games that like I actually was able to play with friends and stuff.
Yeah, and it's such a blast to play. Again, like I don't think you need to do anything super complex when it comes to horror games, and I think every list that you see kind of shows you that if you just keep it simple, it's there. That's all you need. It's just you go from point A to point B and you just kill a bunch of zombies, but it's super fun.
So would you have like a bunch of honorable mentions, or do you want me to give mine?
I think the only other one I have is probably BioShock, and for me it's kind of similar to what kind of Dead Space felt like. The initial time that I played BioShock was very similar. It's not zombies, but you're kind of you're set to face against mutants and random monsters that just kind of walk around, and very similar kind of how I was talking about with Condemned. You'll just hear things randomly and you're just like looking and turning around and trying to figure out where things are coming from. I think the one thing that kind of makes it not as scary with BioShock is you kind of tend to get overpowered very quickly.
Yeah.
And once you kind of get to that level where you're just like super strong, you're not really necessarily worried about the random things. But there are still things like when you see the big daddies kind of coming at you, you're like, okay, crap, I gotta start kind of thinking about what I want to do.
Yeah. I had Silent Hill, the one that came out in 1999. Evil Dead, Left 4 Dead 2, Dead by Daylight, and Dead Rising were some honorable mentions that I think could easily make any kind of top 5 list.
Okay.
So
Well, I guess Resident Evil 4 too. Well, I know I talked about it a lot, and it would be a shame to not throw it on there.
All right, you heard of your Resident Evil 4?
Yeah.
All right, so let's do this like official top 5. So we'll do R3, or not R3. We'll do IGN's, mine, and yours. We'll kind of decide who gets what. You ready? So for number 5, we got Ghost Watchers, Dead Island, or Dead Space.
I think it has to be Dead Space. I think out of all those, Dead Space is the best one.
You think Dead Space is a number 5? I mean, I got that as my number 4.
Yeah, I think it's number 5.
Okay, I'll give that to Dead Space because I mean I will say that like Dead Island, while it was really good, I'm biased because of that trailer. Like the trailer really had nothing to do with the game, but yeah. So yeah, I'll agree with you on that. So for number 4, you got Resident Evil 7. I got Dead Space, and then IGN's got PT. I'm gonna go with Resident Evil 7.
Yeah. I'm very, very biased when it comes to this game, and honestly, I think it could be number 1.
No, not number 1, dude. That's we're leaving that for director's cut. Number 3, we got Amnesia, Phasmophobia, and Five Nights at Freddy's.
That one's tougher for me because again, like while I've never played Phasmophobia, I think the type of game that it is very similar to other games that I have played, and it's very high up there for me. I think for me the only reason why I would even say Five Nights at Freddy's is better is because of how big the entity has become and all the things that kind of surround the Five Nights at Freddy's IP. Like there's so much lore behind it that kind of continues to grow and grow and grow that kind of tends to make it creepier and creepier, like from the movies coming out and all this other stuff coming out. I'm perfectly fine with either one though. I'll let you pick this one.
I'm gonna put Five Nights at Freddy's just because like it kind of ties into that whole animatronics thing, like kind of brings you back to your childhood of like you said, like the Chuck E. Cheese and stuff like that, and just like how creepy like they were. Like you said, it's not necessarily like the scariest game, but it's definitely like a great, fantastic horror game. So number 2, you had what? The Forest. I had The Evil Within, and IGN has Resident Evil 2. What's your thoughts on that one?
That one's very tough for me. I love The Forest. I think The Forest is incredible. I think it's the best survival crafting game ever. And there's a lot of incredible survival crafting games. I just think it adds another layer that you're not really kind of accustomed to with the monsters kind of roaming around and being able to take you out whenever the monsters being able to attack your house and destroy it completely. It's definitely up there for me. Resident Evil 2 is incredible. It's such a good game. It's tough for me because I think Resident Evil 2 is better than The Forest, but I don't think Resident Evil 2 is better than Resident Evil 7. So I can't, in good faith, put that at number 2. It's tough. For me, it's between those two though.
I think you're not even The Evil Within.
No, I never really played it, so I can't really say if like I have maybe like 6 hours in that game, so I can't. And it was like when it first came out, so I can't in good conscience put it above the other two.
I like The Forest. Don't get me wrong, but to me it's just more of like a slightly horror open world survival game. It's not really like a horror. I mean, yeah, it's got like some horror aspects to it, but I don't know, man. This is a tough one.
Yeah, I think the fact that you're kind of you really have to watch where you go and what you do, especially at night when they're more active. And one of the really cool things that this game does is it has the NPCs send scouts just looking for you. If one of them sees you and you don't kill them, they'll come back with more. Like they'll run away and they'll come back with a bunch more. And now you're having to kind of battle it out against a bunch of these mutants. I don't know.
I'm gonna give it to The Forest. I will only in the aspect Only because of the fact that it has virtual reality, and virtual reality takes it up a whole other notch. I said, you need to, if you haven't played it on virtual reality, I highly suggest, because like I said, I've played it on both, and virtual reality does kind of take it up. So I'll give you the Forest at number 2, only if number 1 goes to my director's cut.
It can't. That I'm not.
What you can't in good conscience give me director's cut, dude? You got so many people out there who are our age that play video games that grew up with that freaking Resident Evil game.
I don't think it's better than Resident Evil 2. I don't think it's better than Resident Evil 7. I don't think it's better than Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 8, and I've never even played Resident Evil 8. I think Resident Evil 1 is it's very close to the worst one next to Resident Evil 6 in my opinion.
Oh my, get them out of here.
But again, like it's not even that it's a bad game. It's just not as good as everything else. Like I can't put it above Resident Evil 7.
Yeah, you got like condemned at number 2 or at number 1.
I mean, I'd probably say Silent Hill should be the number 1.
That's what I was gonna say too.
I can't even see Resident Evil 1 being a top 5, like number 5.
Get the out of here, dude! No way! Get the fuck out of here, bro.
It's barely number 5 in a list of top 5 Resident Evil games, in my opinion.
Oh my god, go play it and then come back to me, dude. Go play it again and come back. And then
again, I just think all the other Resident Evil games are just better.
Okay, well, I'm gonna disagree with you heavily and just say we'll put Silent Hill 2, the 2024 remake, up on there as number 1.
And I loved Condemned. And again, if they remake Condemned, maybe we'll come back and we'll say Condemned is the best horror game ever. But
no, we're not going to come back and say that. You'll come back. You'll come back and say that. I'm gonna stick to my Resident Evil director's cut being the best horror game. That's it.
I think you need to play the other Resident Evil games to really get a feel for what Resident Evil really is and what it should be.
Yeah, that's director's cut. I mean, it's like one of the only ones that actually had the whole freaking zombie thing before they started going on all these mutation bullshit.
No. And again, the reason they went that route is because they needed to add another layer. Zombies were kind of very simple and very kind of bland, and it's great what they did. They don't go too overboard. They do just enough, and I think it's perfect. It's great.
Okay, I'm gonna try out some of those other Resident Evils. So just to recap, we got Dead Space is number 5, Resident Evil 7 number 4, Five Nights at Freddy's number 3, The Forest number 2, and Silent Hill 2, the remake, number 1. Man, we only got one game on my list on here, and it's Dead Space, and I had it at number 4, but like I think that's kind of interchangeable with like Resident Evil 7 and Five Nights at Freddy's.
You got to make better lists, man.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm not as good at it as you and IGN. Well, that's it for today's special episode, you guys, of the NoBS. If you've enjoyed the unfiltered conversations, make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube at NoBS Podcast GG, and don't forget to connect with us on X at NoBS Podcast GG for all these updates and more. Catch us on TikTok as well at NoBS Podcast GG. We appreciate you listening. We'll be back this Sunday with more straight talk. NoBS.